You know, I can remember standing right on this platform when I was a boy, and I used to take the train to Rochester. I must have been 7 years old in the early 1970s. And that was right around the time that Buffalo's industrial decline really kicked in. And it lasted decades. And now, what we have left are these huge architectural landmarks, reminding us of the industries that once made Buffalo great. So, what happened to Buffalo? What happened to our industrial might? Where did it go? "200 years ago, Buffalo got its big break right here with the building of the Erie Canal, which had its terminus here, opened in 1825. But the reality of a city like this is it wasn't long after the canal opened that, this place became really seedy in an area down here called the Canal District. And by the early 20th century, Buffalo had become the 8th largest city in America, with more millionaires than any other city in the country. But there's more to the history of Buffalo than just a ditch. What happened to the industry here? Where did the jobs go? Despite its industrial Rust Belt legacy, Buffalo is showing signs of rejuvenation. I think to understand our history, to understand where we've been, helps us to understand ourselves. This is the story of a few of Buffalo's largest architectural landmarks.
Buffalo is a place I call home. Our past is connected to the present through each and every one of us here, and our architecture reminds us of that past. They serve as monuments, reminding us of who we are. So come with me as I go in search of Buffalo's industrial heritage.
Over there is the Buffalo Harbor Lighthouse, arguably one of Buffalo's most notable landmarks, finished in 1833. And today, we get to go inside. I'm out here walking out to arguably the oldest landmark in Buffalo. Guess I get to go up.
It'll probably be down in a couple minutes.
No, I'll do the walk. That'll give me some footage, you know. All right, let's see. Well, here is a place that I've never been, and I did not expect to be. I'm inside the top part of the Buffalo Lighthouse. Weirdly enough, I never thought I would be here. It's hard to get to, by the way. And just out here is the view towards Buffalo and downtown. And I'm sweating. So up here you do get a sense of vertigo when you're looking out over the city.
The known history of this place we now call Western New York goes back to the late 1500s when the Wenro people lived in this region. Around 1639, the Wenro were conquered by the Iroquois Confederacy, forcing many of them to leave the territory. After that, the Seneca Nation of the Iroquois occupied the area and remain here today. But before the Skyline, before the rust, there was Flint, then guns, grain, and steel. We were burned to the ground by the British in 1813, and by 1832, we were a very busy port. You know, it's funny, I've lived here my whole life, and I've never taken the time to come in this landmark, which is open to the public for a small fee. And now, I've got to go back downstairs and squeeze my rather large self inside this little trapdoor looking thing to get down to the next deck, which has a balcony.
So the fun part is going down, and these are very, very steep. So sometimes when you go down, you want to go down backwards or you go down forwards. I'm not sure which, but I'm going to go down backwards. It's like going in a ship. There we go. Oh, much better. So much cooler in here. Going out the porthole. It is. Wow, tiny porthole. Oh, it's windy up here. Cool. So I'm on top of the lighthouse on the outside, and it is wicked windy out here. Let's see if I can get more of a shot. There we go. And that's downtown Buffalo. Make sure. And one of the things that, you think about this was empty land before this. And when the storms would come in, the water would flood out that area. And I was lucky enough today to meet up with Mike Vogel, author of the book, America's Crossroads, which talks about the canal district down here. And so I wanted to get from him the real historical story of what this place was like back in the day. It went from a transient sailor's port, like you would imagine, to an immigrant tenement. And it had all the trappings that you might hear from in a book or something like the Jacob Riis book, How the Other Half Lives.
Being up here made me think about what it must have been like manning this lighthouse during a severe storm.
There we go. This is so cool.
Worrying about those sailors trapped on their ships out on the lakes.
All right. So now the fun part is to go back in this little tiny door, which is right here. And all right, I'm going in. Let's see what I got. Little spot. Okay, now I'm gonna go down backwards. Hold on to something, this handrail, and just one step at a time. And the thing when you're climbing down this stuff is 3 limbs on contact with stuff at all times, and make sure you feel your feet settle comfortably on the ladder, not the former.
My purpose for coming here today was obviously to go inside the lighthouse, but the other thing was to meet with Mike Vogel, who was one of the co-authors of the book America's Crossroads, an amazing account of what life was like down in the old Canal District.
So, unexpectedly today, I decided to come down and see Buffalo's arguably oldest landmark, the Lighthouse, and I happened to stumble across this guy Mike Vogel, who wrote a book with Ed Patton and Paul Redding called America's Crossroads. This was about what was a sailor's docking place to go drink and visit brothels to what eventually transformed into a tenement.
Yeah, and it was a place where sailors got paid off at the end of their voyages from the west, and canalers got paid off at the end of their travels from the east, and they all had money to spend, and they spent it on the things that sailors spend money on, and mix in a few soldiers from Fort Porter, and it got to be one of the roughest waterfronts in the world, behind maybe Shanghai and San Francisco's Barbary Coast.
And so the term Shanghai?
Yeah, there were a lot of legends and stories about people being Shanghai, taken by force or by lack of consciousness onto ships, and they'd wake up at sea or in the lake and find themselves as sailors or on a different ship than they came in on.
One of the things about the term getting shanghaied, I think, as Paul Redding told me years ago, was, you know, you get drunk in the saloons and go to the brothels, pass out, and you wake up on a boat out in the ocean, and you protest to the captain saying, how dare you, I want to go home. And the guy said, sure, you can go home anytime you want, swim.
It was a no-choice decision at that point.
So one of the things that I'm trying to help people understand is the nature of what this sailor's port, this transshipment point was like on a social level. So people got off various kinds of boats, and what did they do? I mean, they got their checks, what?
Well, it was not just a transshipment port, which it was. It was a World Trade Center before that phrase ever was invented. Extremely important to commerce in the United States, but it was also, I mean, you have to envision a river of commerce and trade coming from the west to the east coast via the Erie Canal. And one of the outfalls of that was the Waterfront district got really, really rough. It was known in the city as the infected district.
And why? What do you think the origin? Why would they call it infected?
All kinds of vice. There was a Christian Homestead Association map done in the 1890s when the district was well past its prime as a rough and tumble place that showed in an 11-block area 75 brothels, 105 saloons, 19 what were called free theater saloons, which we probably know more commonly as a burlesque house, and then maybe an equal number, 75 legitimate businesses. There were no social safety nets in the time. So if you were a woman who lost her husband, which was fairly common because there was no safety standards for workforce at that time either, you didn't have a lot of options. You had seamstress, you had domestic service, you had cook, but some of them needed something else to survive. So Buffalo Gals, Won't You Come Out Tonight? That's what that song is about.
Buffalo gal, won't you come out tonight? Come out tonight.
A lot of drinking. There were gambling of various sorts and fisticuffs. You know, canalers and sailors did not get along very well.
One of the things I researched in newspapers.com was Doug's Dive. And the first occurrence I could find of it was 1858, and then stories of it seemed to peter off around the 1890s. But you know, it makes for a great, sensationally lousy place. Can you tell me anything you remember about writing about it?
Well, there are actually 4 different locations for Doug's Dive over time. Okay. The most famous one was in the Union Block, which is now that grassy slope across from the ruins at Canal Side. It flooded regularly because it was, Canal Side's commercial slip floods regularly now in Seixas. In the day, that sort of washed out Doug's Dive every once in a while. Very ramshackle bar, very rough place, rooms for people to flop in.
Really?
It was a haven in some of the racial disputes down there. Yeah. And for a time, it was sort of the place where newspapermen in search of a story would go with a police escort and talk to Doug and get some, color of the district type stories.
And that's interesting because I go to places around the world and do stories, and we have armed escorts with us, depending, Congo, Africa, or somewhere in seedy. and I can imagine those newspaper men doing that and writing with some, considerable disdain as to the quality of the characters down there and their immorality, but in many senses it seems like they just needed shelter and a place to exist. Well, thank you so much.
My pleasure entirely. Come back and visit anytime.
I think I will. Thanks.
Yes, Buffalo does have an amazing waterfront. To be truthful, it's not that much different than any other large industrial city in the Northeast.
Here we are.
But this
Finishing up at
is
the
our Buffalo.
Buffalo Lighthouse.
It's home. It's fun to look at these old photographs that I've overlaid to get an idea what it used to look like here. Quite a different place. To get an idea of just how huge Buffalo's industrial complex used to be, I headed down to the old Bethlehem Steel property that's currently being managed by a buddy of mine.
Buffalo's the kind of place that inspires legends. Like the samurai or the cowboy, Buffalo's blue-collar workers became iconic as a way to describe America's industrial might. During World War II, this place did so much as part of the arsenal of democracy. And this place was one of the 15 largest cities producing armaments and things for the war effort. But there were a lot of factors that led to Buffalo's industrial decline. And we weren't alone. But we had a unique situation here in heavy industry and its history, starting with the Erie Canal in 1825. We eventually became known as one of the largest shipping and grain ports in the country, if not the world. And with the coming of the St. Lawrence Seaway in the late 1950s, it was sort of like having a highway bypass skip your town, and Buffalo began its decline.
To the Atlantic. Key to the route is the Welland Canal connecting Ontario with Erie. Because of the difference in the water level between the two lakes, the canal system of 8 locks raises a ship more than 300 feet in passing from a west to eastbound direction. Lowers it going...
Eventually, by the 1960s and the 1970s, some of these huge steel mills were slowly becoming obsolete. They weren't as cost effective.
With state-of-the-art electronic process controls.
And wages had a huge impact on these corporate bottom lines.
Today, steelmakers believe it's important to do more for their customers than just make steel. Bethlehem Steel is committed to giving customers a quality product, superior service, and much more.
And now, there isn't a whole lot left, but memories.
To get a better sense of this steel mill and what it meant to Buffalo history, I managed to get a hold of a local historian who has accumulated an archive of the ship traffic and the industrial transportation traffic in this area.
Well, Brian, thanks for coming out today. And this place, where are we?
You're basically standing at the north end of the Bethlehem Steel plant in Lackawanna.
I guess, to me, this is like one of the largest monuments, if you will, to industries that were here in Buffalo. And I guess what really surprised me from seeing your social media page was the amount of shipping that still goes on here. Can you talk to me a little about what the shipping industry is doing now?
Sure, that everybody in Buffalo seems to have this misconceived notion of ships don't come here anymore, the St. Lawrence Seaway killed it, the steel mill closed, blah, blah, blah. The Port of Buffalo is not dead. It still gets a lot of different kinds of products, maybe not to the degree it did in its heyday, but there is still a lot of activity from Tonawanda to Buffalo itself to Lackawanna, between petroleum products, bulk goods, dimensional loads, grain, cement, and 10 other things.
So it's still a pretty good way to move large amounts of things around. I think you and I were talking about sugar.
Sure.
And there was something over that way.
The ship in port today came all the way from Veracruz, Mexico with a load of sugar.
No way. Mexico to here?
Yeah, and before that, the contract was with a place in Sao Paulo, Brazil.
So for this steel mill, what did they make here? I mean, can you talk about the process or how many people worked here, do you think? I don't know.
All these operations here involved crushing coal, turning it, baking it into coke, and then shipping it out.
So when they take coal and they make coke, it's sort of like making charcoal from wood, isn't it?
Yeah, ovens.
It burns better or something?
There were coke oven batteries here.
Yeah.
And they charge the raw coal in one side, and then they heat it with gas. And then when the coal cooks, it becomes almost like pure carbon. So that is your fuel for the blast furnace in the steel mill.
400 degrees Fahrenheit to make them.
I wonder about, like, in the heyday of this place, like, well, how many people must have worked here?
At the peak, they say the World War II years were the busiest. You're talking 22,000.
22,000. You know how many people worked at Curtiss Wright in World War II? 80,000 people in one plant, but they were cranking out airplanes.
Those were the boom times here.
Yeah, and across the Northeast. And that's the American dream as we currently grew up.
On a blue collar.
On a blue collar American
Income,
dream. I mean, the idea that these guys could make that kind of money without a traditional education is pretty impressive. And you know, the automotive workers are making great money, where a kid that goes to college for 4 years gets a degree in engineering.
Sure.
You know, and a lot of that manifested here is the real American dream. So you had these guys raising their families, had their house, had their car, beautiful stuff. And then what happened?
Well, once you get to the 1980s, you had foreign competition, and the reason they were competing with us hardcore was because we rebuilt a lot of the steel mills in Japan and Germany after World War II with American taxpayer money.
Under the Marshall Plan, probably.
And gave them all the new technology. Where here we're making steel with technology from the beginning of the plant, 30, 40 years before that.
Okay.
So then you get overassessments and taxes, locally, state. They're hammering Bethlehem with all kinds of taxes. You have a shift in the marketplace from the northeastern United States pushing out west, and then that jacks up your transportation costs because you got finished goods going out the door. Now you got to truck them or rail them west past Chicago, wherever they're going.
Right.
So that increases costs. Then you have the rise of the mini mills cutting in on the action of a fully integrated plant. And then another huge factor too is when the American steel mills in the heyday in the 40s, 50s, 60s were doing well.
Yeah.
They did not spend a lot of time reinvesting, a lot of money reinvesting in these mills.
So it might be fair to say that there were a number of things that contributed to the decline and collapse of the steel mills in North America, in the northeast. Wages, usually for an employer, are one of the largest single costs. But on top of that is increasing environmental regulation, constraining their ability to do their work.
Yep.
And then eventually cheaper foreign competition with lower labor costs.
This property is huge, and we were lucky to get permission to be here today. Our next stop is to the area where many of the coal ships were unloaded back in the day. Today, it's being used for other purposes.
This is really, what, the port of Buffalo?
Yeah, this is what they would consider the public Port of Buffalo. There's multiple businesses located on the property that get the inbound goods.
And this ship is full of sugar.
Yep, raw cane sugar.
And it came from South America, which kind of blows my mind because, I don't know, I always thought that Great Lakes ships only sailed on the Great Lakes, but these are ocean-going vessels that come in.
They're just small enough, even though it's huge, just small enough to fit through the 730-foot dimensions of the St. Lawrence Seaway.
Okay, and they come through the Welland Canal to get here.
Yeah, that's the transition point between Lake Erie and Lake Ontario upbound to get to Buffalo.
And up to St. Lawrence. This winter I went up to Quebec City and we took the
that's
ferry
halfway
boat
to
rides.
the ocean.
Yeah, it's really cool. We rode the ferry boats across the ice and the river and stuff.
This would have went right by there.
Wow. There's a lot more ship traffic coming to Buffalo than I think the common public realizes.
Sure, in a season's time, and that season being, let's just round it off and say April till December or January.
Yeah.
About 2 to 3 months off in the middle when the lake ice is too hard, too thick, too hard to get through. In that time, you usually would see in a typical year, ballpark, about 65 transits of ships, large tug barges, any kind of tanker traffic, bulk products, coming and going.
Yeah, this winter there was 2 ships stuck in the ice off the coast of Buffalo. One made the national news, but there was a second one that was just out off the Buffalo Lighthouse that one of the local tugs with the G on it was out pushing it around in the harbor. Do you know why that boat stayed there that way for that long? What is there a process?
That was a really strange occurrence. And what happened was an icebreaker came to escort in a different ship. And when they punched through the ice outside the harbor, when the ships entered the harbor and the icebreaker turned around and went back out, it flushed in just enough of a flow of broken up ice that when the ship you're referring to, the American Mariner, backed out, they ran into that slushy brash ice, they call it.
Brash ice.
And then the wind changed. And the wind beset them.
Yeah, it squished them in like packing snow in around a cooler.
Yeah, I wouldn't call them officially stuck.
Right,
like
I remember you and I talked on social media about that.
Yes, it was more of them just being unable to maneuver.
So, on that note, with the installation of the St. Lawrence Seaway, some people say that was a death knell for Buffalo, like putting in a highway bypass. What's your thought on the St. Lawrence coming in?
What the St. Lawrence wrecked here was the transshipment business. So anything that was headed eastbound that came to Buffalo by boat that got transferred here to rail, that's the business that died. Other products are still economically viable to ship through the port. That's not what these items are coming here for. The stuff that's coming here is being consumed here. And that will always be cheaper than rail or truck.
In this film, I've been on a search to get a better understanding of Buffalo, a place I call home. In our next episode, we're headed over to see a few more of Buffalo's largest and underrated architectural landmarks. And my friend Mark takes us on a ride up the Buffalo River to see the grain elevators. We also get to take a ride to the top of the old Central Terminal, a train station that's been closed since the 1970s.
A whole lot.
Then we take a trip inside the old Buffalo Psychiatric Hospital, parts of which have been closed for years. Also, please click the like button and the subscribe button to my channel. It helps us get more traffic. Thanks for watching.